Good afternoon, folks. Ryan Gonzales here with Becker Properties. I'm joined with my co-host, Mr. Carlos Cruz from eMortgage Capital. And we've got a special guest today, Mr. Jeff Howerton. He's been an appraiser for about 20 years now. And so since he's got in the business till now, a lot has changed. And we want to talk to him today about appraisals in general, because there's a lot of information that I think buyers and sellers need to know when it comes to appraisals, what to look for and what to know.
What to expect.
What to expect, definitely.
Because reading that package that you get from the appraisal report, it's like you think you need a degree from MIT. It's a science report.
It's a lot for sure. I want to start with Jeff and tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, how you got into the appraisal world, and what's changed in the last couple of years.
Well, thanks for having me. And like you said, I've been appraising almost 20 years. This is my second career. My first career was in healthcare, and that's where I met my wife. And we weren't dating or anything back then. We had mutual friends. We used to hang out. Long story short, she ended up in Texas. We ended up starting a relationship. I moved to Texas. I continued in healthcare. Before I moved down here, she made the switch from healthcare to real estate. When I got down here, I was like, that looks good. So I checked into it and started working in real estate. I knew I didn't want to be an agent, though. And she told me one time we were coming home from supper, and she said, as much as you like to argue and as much as you like details, you should be an appraiser. And I was like everybody else. I was like, what's an appraiser?
Yep.
So I did some research. I checked into it. It was a good time to take the classes and transition into that, and so here I am.
Awesome.
Becoming an appraiser is a pretty serious process. Mm-hmm. How long does that take?
It depends on what license you want to go through. You typically start out with taking the basic real estate or appraisal classes, the principles and practices and whatnot. At the time that I did it, I took a 2-week course, and then you get you're able to get your trainee's license from that. Once you have your trainee's license, then you find a mentor and you work with them. And depending on if you're going for just licensed or certified residential or general appraiser, general appraisers can do commercial and residential. Certified appraisers can do $1 million plus and complex properties. Licensed real estate appraisers can only do up to $1 million and up to like 1 to 4 unit homes.
There's different levels.
So different levels, different number of experience hours. So when I went through it, I had to have 2,500 hours of verifiable work experience with my mentor.
That's a lot.
And I think they've been changing that a lot. So recently they're lowering it.
Sounds like
are
it's
they really?
Yeah.
I know the path for some people seemed very challenging. A friend of mine, her son got into it, and that first mentor that he had didn't want to pay him. So he was living on his own money, learning his career.
That's tough.
And he finally found another mentor that he shifted to that I was actually paying him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not okay. Yeah. You got to pay your people for the work.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's pretty common too, though.
I've heard that it is.
So.
I want to start from the beginning for people that don't really know who or what an appraiser is and what they do when they look at a house. Mm-hmm. Someone who's never bought a house before, how would you explain it to them?
The best way to explain it is we look at the value of the house. Part of the valuation process is for us to go out and actually inspect the property. And we call that the appraisal inspection, and a lot of times people confuse that with a home inspection.
Sure.
When we come up to a property, we assume that everything is in good working order, that the roof is good, the foundation's good, the electrical, the plumbing, all of that kind of stuff. So we don't get as in depth as what the home inspector does. We check the attic and other stuff unless we're notified either from a prior home inspection or, I walk into a house and I see a big stain on the ceiling that looks like it's an active leak or something like that, and that requires further inspection. But we typically don't do that. We make a mention of it in the report, and we say for a qualified home inspector, plumber, contractor, roofer, electrician, whatever it
Engineering
is,
report.
engineering
Yeah.
report, and stuff like that. But what we're looking for is the value of that home and that neighborhood as of the day that we come and inspect the home. And that entails a detailed look at the market, what the trends in the market are. We compare the condition and the upgrades and everything else and all the amenities and features that that property has in the market, and we develop opinion of value, and that's either provided to the bank or to a private owner or to an estate or to an attorney or a church or whatever. And so that's basically, we look at the value of the property in the market at the time.
So at what step do y'all come in through the contract process?
Well, you got to keep in mind that there's different types of appraisals, there's different types of assignments, and stuff like that. But typically, we'll get a copy of the contract when we get the order from the lender. A lot of times the lender will provide it. Sometimes the agent provides it if the lender doesn't have it yet. And so, yeah, we get a look at the contract. And so, yes, we know what the contract price or the sales price is at the time. But what we're looking at, and we're required by USPAP, which is our code of ethics and our standards and procedures and stuff and appraisals, to analyze the sales contract to look for any excessive sales concessions or money that was provided from a relative, or if it's transaction between two people that are related, if they're lowering the price a lot or they're giving them a loan and stuff like that. So we're looking at the financing conditions, we're looking at the sales price, and so we analyze the market and we report that right in the form, page 1.
So every appraisal is reviewed by a third party or by like a board after you do an appraisal?
Not necessarily every appraiser. When we send it back to the lender, a lot of times the lenders will have their own review appraisers, and that's another service that I can provide as a certified appraiser. I can get a lender that might call me and say, we need either a desktop review on this where I go through and I look at the work and see if they maybe use the best comps and stuff. And
See if it makes sense.
Yeah, and see if the value's there, if I agree with that appraiser's opinion of value. And then there's the field review, which you actually go out, drive by the property, drive by the comparables and stuff like that. In addition to that, when those appraisals are all submitted, they go to the GSEs like Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and Penny Mac and those, and they will pull certain amount of appraisals
For an audit.
Yeah, and do audits on appraisals. And typically when they do audit, they'll look at maybe several of that appraiser's work over maybe a 3 to 5 year span. And if they see any discrepancies, they send them a letter. A letter. They specify what they think was not correct, and you get either a warning, or in some cases you could get reported to your state board, and then there may be some significant circumstances after that. So
Here's a question that I've got. So we as a lender, we don't get to pick the appraiser, not anymore, not after '08. And so we have to go through a third party, which is usually a third party within the company that goes and contacts either the appraiser and then pushes it out to like an order, and then whatever appraiser picks it up is random. So what we end up running into is in these small towns, let's say, East Texas, where there's a small population, you're going to sometimes get the same appraiser over and over again. This happened to me last year. We had an appraiser pick up an order, do the inspection. Well, the house was on the old pier and beam, so the family had just renovated the entire exterior, so they had some extra building materials and they stored them under the home. Well, this appraiser flagged it as a health and safety condition, billed the family for another $150 and delayed the appraisal. Fine. We got it moved. Everything was fine. We closed fine. About a month later, we get the same appraiser. This time, again, health and safety. It was a cracked window, but it's a double pane glass, and it was on the exterior, not the interior. And it wasn't as if it was a massive crack where somebody was going to push their hand. It was literally a 1-inch crack. And so we contacted our team and said, we want this appraiser removed from the entire panel, because it was clear what they were doing was simply milking every deal
I was
for a
going to
few
ask you
extra
that.
bucks.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. That's an annotation. That is not a cancellation and a request for a new order. That was bad. So there is responsibility, I think, that everybody has. You know, I've heard of loan officers calling appraisers and pressuring them.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Those appraisers reported them.
There used to be less oversight on appraisers, right? At one point?
Yes and no.
Okay.
But yeah, it's. Are you familiar with the UAD, the Unified Appraisal Data Set? That came about right around 2008 when we were required to go through the appraisal management companies, and that was to make sure that appraisers were all using like the same reporting for light condition, quality, and other stuff.
A uniform.
Yeah, it's a uniform. And the other thing that did, besides changing the forms and whatnot, it also, the government collects all that data, the GSEs. So they keep that in a pool, and they can see if I do an appraisal on your house today and another appraiser did one, 2 years ago, they have that data that they can look at it and said, well, I called it a, condition superior to what the other appraiser did, and they can question that unless I just simply put in the report that, there's been some recent updating within the last 1 to 3 years, and then that they can see that makes sense. We as appraisers have an issue with the fact that we don't get that data. We can't see that.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
They don't share that data with us. And it kind of makes it feel like a cloak and dagger.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Type thing for us. It's always like, we hear a lot about they're trying to get rid of appraisers. They're trying to get rid of appraisers. And I know a lot of institutions and a lot of real estate agents and stuff probably would like to, but it's just progress moving forward, and there's always going to be people that are on board, people that are going to resist, and that's just the progression of things. So
I've always liked appraisers for the most part. There's some that I felt like were being a little bit too nitpicky on stuff, but for me, I think it's really the agent's responsibility to be educated and know what they're doing when it comes to comps and certain upgrades and stuff like that, because I feel like there's a lot of bad advice given to buyers or sellers. And since I was mentored by somebody really good in the industry, I feel like I've never really had too many issues. And I set the expectations up front for the buyers, the sellers, or whatnot. As long as you have a good agent that's pricing it right and being realistic with the upgrades or the lot size or square footage or whatnot, I think for the most part you'll be okay. And I feel like for first-time buyers, which I used to work a lot with primarily, it gives them a little bit of peace of mind that you're coming in there and saying, yeah, this house is worth what you're paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting story just happened recently on a recent closing we had. Brand new home built inside the city limits. The family, we were able to use one of the city programs, and we got the family a $30,000 grant. Well, the buyer, was really unhappy with the price. He said, well, the houses down the street are $20,000 less, and they look the same. Different builder. And he was very angry. He felt like he was being robbed.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, well, time out. The price that you agreed on was fair. I said, and here's the interesting thing. The appraisal took homes that were like type. Mm-hmm. He didn't use those other homes because they weren't like type. Different district, different neighborhood, different everything. And I said, oh, and by the way, the realtor got you an extra $5,000 in equity because the appraisal came in higher than what you're buying it for. So you didn't lose, you actually won. But he didn't see it that way.
No.
Because he just saw that a brand new house down the road was lower. And so it can be very difficult for some people that especially aren't in our industry. But I think had the agents been able to set that stage early and say, hey, look, these are a different neighborhood. If you want to look there, then we can look there. But the reason you're getting this money is because of where this house is at.
Yeah, that brings up a point. There's a lot of misconception when it comes to appraisals and value of houses. A lot of people think it's just a price per square foot, but we all know it's a big difference between a 1-story and a 2-story.
Right.
And also builders. I mean, there's different builders that have different quality upgrades or standards or whatnot. I want you to talk a little bit about that. How much does a builder come into play when it comes to appraisals?
As far as new construction, or do you mean, when the house was built, what the builder was?
Just who the builder was in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of difference because, again, you're looking at the quality of the construction. And we talked a little bit earlier about spray foam and new technologies and stuff like that. And there is a clear difference in builders. And agents know it, appraisers know it, and I'm not going to mention different builders and stuff.
Sure.
All the builders are subject to a standard in their industry, and they have to adhere to that. Some of them may go over a little bit, some of them may not. I think the biggest thing is that when buyers need to be informed when they're looking at these homes and looking at their contracts and stuff, because different builders will offer things like different grades of lumber, and if you can get that higher grade of lumber or even the middle of the road than just the lowest, most buyers aren't going to do that. They're not going to spend the money, and things like that. But when you look at neighborhoods, most neighborhoods are built out by one or
Sure.
3 or 4 different builders. So when I go into a neighborhood, I'm looking at that neighborhood, I'm looking at that subdivision, and I try to find, just like you mentioned, comparable sales that are of similar quality of construction and build.
Here's a question. So let's say you go into a neighborhood where there's 4 communities, and I'm buying in community A. Do you look for homes first in community A, or do you look at all 4 communities?
I would usually, I would start in community A. If there's not enough sales, then I'll go out.
And then have to go out,
Yeah.
right.
And that's where the experience of an appraiser comes in.
Sure.
There's neighborhoods, I've been doing this long enough that I remember when they first started out, now they're old neighborhoods, River Mist is a good example, and they had some problems with the retaining walls
I
out
remember
there. And things like that if you don't get a local appraiser, you get somebody that's out of state, and that's perfectly acceptable, but it's the appraiser's responsibility to educate themselves on the market that they're appraising in. But you kind of know in advance. Another scenario that I came across recently was a neighborhood where I was appraising a home, and there happened to be a tornado that came through, and it hit 2 homes in that neighborhood. And so an investor bought them, tore them down, completely built them up. Okay, now you're in an older neighborhood,
But with a brand new home.
with brand new homes,
Those are difficult.
And just because they're brand new, does that mean they're of the same quality?
Right.
So that makes it a difficult assignment. you
Sure.
know?
We had one house in Alamo Heights. It was a brand new. Somebody had found a lot, and they were able to build like 4 or 5 little houses that were all tall and narrow, very unlike the entire neighborhood. The traditional Alamo Heights house,
Yep.
right, 1 story. So, and his price point was premium. I mean, it was probably $800,000 for a 1,200 square foot house.
Sheesh.
And he was not going to drop the price. And we had an appraiser go out there, and appraisal came back like $200,000 less. He's like, I'm not assigning it the same value as these other homes. It's just not the same home. And so he ended up having to go and scour the city for like type houses and then make neighborhood adjustments in pricing.
Right.
Yeah, builder was not happy. And the family walked away. They're like, we're not overpaying for a house that you think is higher.
That's on the builder.
I have another weird one. I was getting into the business. I was brand new. We get a contract, small house. Again, Alamo Heights is maybe 1,800 square feet. Appraiser goes out there, and the appraisal report comes back with a value like $30,000 lower. Most intelligent realtors don't make a $30,000 mistake. So we were looking through it, and the realtors, the buyer agent and the seller agent, were really upset because they said the appraiser was wrong. And we said, in what aspect? They said, well, the appraiser says this house is only 1,200 square feet and it's 1,400 square feet. And I said, well, you do know how appraiser figures that out. He actually measures the property, goes inside, confirms. They're like, no, it's wrong. BCAD says it's bigger.
Oh, man.
And I said, well, my suggestion is why don't you guys go out there and do what they did before we ask for them to pay for another inspection and have him go back out and reconfirm. Yeah, they made an oops. It was the same size the appraiser had measured it because he actually used a measuring tape, not what the county said it was.
How often do you see that mistake?
All the time.
Yeah.
Really?
All the time, yeah.
Yeah.
And especially in some of the older neighborhoods and older homes because, back in the day, that wasn't all computerized. And so somebody at some point in time had to type all that into the computer.
Mistyped a number.
Yeah. I mean, you'll see like 1,918 square foot, and it comes out 1,819 square foot. The other thing is, in the newer construction and stuff like that, when the builder submits their plans and stuff for different sites, and they're going to say, okay, we're planning on building this size home on there. Well, the home gets sold, the lot gets sold, and this home's going to be put on it beforehand. And some builders will allow the new owner, the buyer, to make changes to the floor plan, to the square footage. And that never catches up with bare appraisal. So
Interesting.
you'll see that a lot. But I'd say only about 10, 20% of the time is bare appraisal close to where when we actually measure it.
Yeah.
I've got a personal question.
Sure.
So I've got a very old home.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a contractor come in because the master bedroom is right next door to the garage. And so we had a contractor come in. They took half the garage and converted it into a full master closet with laundry room.
Okay.
They took the remaining quarter of the garage, or we did, and converted it to a coffee bar and storage room for groceries.
Okay.
How does that get added into value, or does it get added in value, or how does it work?
Yeah. And that's another service that we as appraisers provide. I get a lot of calls from agents that, they've been doing this a long time. They can walk in a house, walk around and go, this doesn't feel like 2,000 square foot. It feels more like 2,500 or 2,200.
Somebody did something.
Or they'll kind of do a rough measurement. They'll do the interior rooms and stuff. And so they'll call me in for a fee. I'll go out and I'll measure it, and I'll give them an appraisal sketch that they can actually put in the MLS. Because the MLS, you have to have a verifiable square footage. And a lot of agents get that from the bare appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you could also get it from a previous appraisal, or you could have an engineer come out and measure it. It's a lot cheaper to call an appraiser to come out, and then you can actually put the sketch right in there.
So if somebody wants to hire you to do a new appraisal based on these upgrades that have happened in their home, and I'm always telling people, especially people that are trying to buy fixer-uppers, because you want to get out of that PMI as quick as you can. That mortgage insurance is not nice. So let's say somebody does all this work. How do they reach you? Do they just go, hey, I need an appraiser?
Yeah, you can look on the on our website on the Texas Appraisal and Licensing Certification Board.
Which we can put that up there.
A lot of appraisers have a website. I don't. I probably should, but I'm older. But you had mentioned about working with agents and being educated and stuff, and I have lenders that I work with that call me, and I'll come and I'll talk. They'll get some agents together that they're wanting to solicit their business, and they'll have me come in and we do kind of a question answer. I go to real estate agencies, brokers, and do talks. I do podcasts now. I can put that on the resume. So I'm fortunate because I get a lot of word of mouth, and I work with a lot of agents, and I like working with agents. My first mentor, when I started out, he started out as an agent, became an appraiser.
You better like agents.
And
You're married to one.
And actually, that helps me too because my name gets put out there. But anyway, I'd like to get back to answering your question about the square footage.
Okay.
Before I completely forget about it, when I mentioned about going and doing measuring a house and stuff, they're not just paying me just to walk around, do the measurement. They're paying for my opinion. Would that additional square footage that you converted, would that be considered as part of the gross living area? And there's certain qualifications that have to be met. Is it tied into the main heating and air conditioning? Does it have separate heating and air conditioning? Is it permanent? You may not be able to tap into the main heating and air conditioning, but you might put in a mini split unit or something like that. If you're just plugging in a space heater for FHA, that wouldn't work. And then do you have to go through an unfinished area to get to that area? Do you have to go outside to get to that area? So we look at all these things. It also needs to be finished out the same as the rest of the home, or better. And so that's something I can make a determination.
Yeah, the closet is way better than the rest of the house.
yeah. Before you get to the appraisal process, and another appraiser comes in there to do their appraisal, and they look at that and they go, no. All your marketing and your pricing and everything and your negotiating is all based on that being gross living area, and now you're finding out that it's not.
So would you suggest, let's say a family buys a fixer-upper, and they say, hey, this is what we want to do, this is what the cost is, would you think that it's a good idea to get a hold of an appraiser before or after they do the work?
For what service? Just to measure it?
Just to kind of give perspective?
Or for value?
And value. Because I think it's both that they want to know.
Yes and no.
Okay.
There are some investors that I work with, and they buy the homes off the courthouse street, and they'll look at it and they'll go, yeah, we want you to come in and measure this, because they want to know exactly what square footage they're going to be working with. And they might be considering an addition on it or enclosing an area or something like that. That's the yes. The no would be most good investors know their business. They know the market. They work with real estate agents. They've been doing this long enough. They know that for this to be profitable, we need to spend this amount, no more, per square foot to get this home up to sale, and they'll have their profit and everything built into that. So I don't see a lot of that.
So what I'm hearing is, at different stages, depending on who you are, whether you're the investor, whether a family it's important to either talk to that appraiser up front and then definitely schedule that visit afterwards to really confirm that value is in line with what it should be or could be.
Yeah.
Because God forbid you want to underprice something.
Right.
And you lose $10,000.
And that's another thing that I get a lot of call from agents for. You might have a unique property, and there's just not enough comparables. And it may be a newer agent. They're not as comfortable, and they may have talked to other people in their office, their broker and stuff, and they may have suggested get an appraisal. And so I would go out and I would do an appraisal on it and say, yeah, and that's a market estimate type appraisal. That's a different appraisal than I would do for a lender. Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's something you and Ryan, you and I could do at your shop is bring all your newer agents in.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Any of that knowledge is helpful.
Absolutely. I've always found it really beneficial to talk to an appraiser.
And if you look on my business card, it says call me.
Okay.
That's what I always tell agents.
Yeah.
Every time that I give a talk or anything, I'm like, if you have questions, call me.
Yeah.
If you don't get me, leave me a voice message.
Lender, do not call him. Lender, do not call him.
Yeah. So, and that, again, that's a way for me to generate business and get my name out there. And a lot of agents take advantage of that. They just run into that thing, or like we all do sometimes. You just look at it and look at it and look at it and look at it, and you're running around in circles. Pick up the phone, call me. I can give you a perspective. I can give you some tips, or I can provide you a service that, you can pay me for. But I don't ever mind answering questions. I don't typically answer the phone when I'm on site doing an inspection. That's why I always say leave a message if you don't get me, and I will call you back.
Mm-hmm.
So,
one thing I want to talk about that's a hot topic right now is the market in general, how appraisals are coming in right now. I'm seeing a couple of them coming a lot lower compared to COVID times, or right after COVID times, when appraisals were coming in way above asking price because of the demand. How much has that changed? What can you give us a couple of scenarios and stories of how much that's changed and what you're seeing today?
It all depends on the neighborhood. It depends on the market.
The price point. I'm seeing $1 million homes that are not losing anything.
Right.
These $300,000 homes that might be 3 years old that are still in a community being built, and now that builder has dropped price a lot. We've had some problems with those.
Yeah, and I keep up on the trends. You get a lot of data and stuff, and you can look at national trends, and it says Texas, the home prices may be falling and stuff like that. But again, you got to get into that specific market. I do see a little bit in some areas where there's a little bit of a downward turn, but not anything that I would call significant. I think that we're still under the problem of most owners. They have that good interest rate, and interest rates are higher, so there's less buyers. So, it's starting to shift a little bit with the lower interest rates, but in San Antonio in general, because of the military and bigger employers like USAA and Southwest Research, we see a lot of fluctuation in and out. If I'm sitting on a nice low interest rate, but I'm getting a job transfer, I still got to sell, or if you're moving into the area. And that's kind of what I've seen over my career a lot, is that there's that influx of in and out buyers and sellers. And so that kind of keeps us on more of a gentle rise and fall, 3 to 5 maybe.
Yeah.
Like even back in 2008 when the market was downturned and a lot of foreclosures and everything went down. San Antonio, compared to the rest of the country, most areas, we weathered that fairly well. We didn't have those massive declines, and we did have foreclosures and stuff like that, but we didn't have near as many. So again, depending on the market and the price point, like you mentioned, those are big things. But I don't see anything really shockingly going up and down, other than normal fluctuations of people moving in and out. So
it's been difficult, because if a family or 2 families or 3 families have to sell and they've been on the market for too long, you'll see them drop their price. And now somebody right at that exact moment buys a house for a higher price. Those close before we can get that appraisal ordered. And now his value that he's buying isn't in line, because those houses that sold have changed the market value.
Yeah.
And we've run into a couple of those this last year.
That's a good point, because you got to remember that appraisals always lag behind the market, because we rely a lot on the comparable sales.
Sold data.
But I typically analyze active and listings. It's required by some lenders for FHA, and a lot of lenders, even if it's not an FHA type loan. If you're appraising in a declining market, then you need to provide at least a couple active or pendings, or at least one. But I try to look at those and see what the market is going to be doing but we as appraisers have to be real careful because we are not forecasters. You know, we don't forecast what the market is. I can't put in a report that, well, you know, it shows that it's this much, but it'd probably go for that much.
Was it more difficult to appraise homes right after COVID, or would it be more difficult to appraise homes now? Or would you say
now, because there's a lot less comparable sales?
Yeah.
Really?
You know, the market is slow.
It's that slow that it's harder?
Yeah, it's a lot harder to find decent comparables, you know. Before COVID and even up to 2008 when you mentioned, and right after that, that was a tough time to find good comparables. But it kind of came back, and you can usually find enough that'll work. But now it's like everything is, you know, man, I'd like to find one that's more recent or
what's the
or
furthest you can
whatnot.
go back? A year or 6 months?
Typically, the lender would prefer that we stayed within 12 months. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHA have a guideline about that we need to have a certain number of sales that were within the last 12 months. Some lenders even have requirement that they want 1 or 2 sales that sold within the last 90 days.
We had one that was so tough. It was a neighborhood built around a lake with a private airport.
Wow.
And every house was different. Some were log cabins, some were traditional homes, some were estate-style homes.
That's a tough one.
And that appraisal came in at half the price because he went off build cost.
I did.
And it was tough, and they ended up walking away.
Yeah, I did what I was going to say before I had to cough was, but myself as an appraiser, and I'm sure other appraisers do it because it's common practices, we'll put those appraisals in there and we'll meet that criteria, but then we'll add other sales that we think are better, more comparable, and
Better
once
comps.
we make the adjustments, more comparable, better comps, and we'll put a lot of weight on those. So we're meeting the requirement, but we're also saying, hey, you know, this is a truer picture, and that entails a lot of explanation, because again, when we do an appraisal, and you guys were talking about this earlier, when you first look at an appraisal, it's like, man, you got to have a degree to go through it. Most people just look at that number of, okay, what's it worth, you know?
What's it worth, and is it as is?
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people don't even know to look if it's as is. if
Yeah.
they're
Well,
not
a
as.
lot of loan officers also forget to scroll down to see if there's any other requirements.
Yeah, but you know, you want it to be as easy for the reader to be able to look at it and say, okay, yeah, I see the reasoning here. I see the support that he used or she. I see the explanations of why. You know, you get a lot from agents. Oh, that appraiser used a 2-story. You know, there's a 1-story. Why do you throw in a 2-story? I'll throw in a 2-story as not one of my first 3 comps if I'm trying to bracket a specific feature. What if that's the only one that has a pool in the whole neighborhood? It's a 2-story. Should I go way out of the neighborhood to find a 1-story? Well, trust me, I've looked, and it's not as good of a comparable. So you got to make that
So
adjustment.
there's a reason why you may use
There
a
are a
2-story.
lot
Okay.
of reasons, and
Okay.
if you look in the report, you know,
You'll explain it.
You'll see appraiser used comparable number 4 to bracket the swimming pool,
And-
you know, and made appropriate adjustments.
Gotcha. Guys.
I would tell you it's tough because, and I'm not saying that the realtor is not reading the report. I don't know.
Mhm.
But it is hard to read. It isn't something that if you're not reading it daily or at least a couple of them a month, it's easy to miss something on there that you need to go back and really review. You'll see adjustments. And so that's one of the things I want to talk about, where it says, you know, adjustments for square footage, and then it's an added value, or adjustments for lot size, and it's an added value. And so it becomes a math computation. It's complex,
Yeah.
very complex. And what I've seen, though, is we get a situation where appraisal comes in with a value, that is lower than the purchase price. Realtor, buyer, seller agent, everybody is upset. And there's a process, right? So we can either renegotiate the price or we can contest the appraisal. So explain to me what it means when somebody contests an appraisal.
Okay. Real quick, if I could, I want to go back to what you asked me at the beginning about are all appraisals reviewed. When we submit the appraisal to the lender, it does get reviewed by an underwriter. So yes, you were correct in that. I'm so used to that being an everyday thing that I didn't even think about that. But yeah, whenever we send it back, there's an underwriter that's going to look at it and going to review it and say, okay, you either have a typo here, might be something as, you misspelled the address. I mean, it happens. We're human. Or it could be a something really significant that the lender doesn't agree with and they want a little clarification. So they'll kick it back. And then getting back to what you were asking, that's reconsideration of value. And there's been a lot about that over the last year, couple of years. And the Appraisal Foundation and the powers that be have changed the reconsideration of value. And what it's designed for is an easier mechanism for users of the appraisal, the lenders or the buyer or whoever, to have a path to get the appraiser to reconsider. And it also helps the appraiser a little bit more to say, okay, in the old days they used to just browbeat you, just use this comparable, use this comparable, use this comparable, or if you would have considered this, if you would have considered this, if you would have considered this. The best thing if you're going to ask for an appraiser to change the value is to provide better comparables. And we get that a lot. I get not a lot, but in certain times when you know it came in low and you tried to support it as much and put in there everything you could, and the lender will send you some comparables, and you go through and you look at them, and this one was over 24 months ago. This one was first seller. So it was, it was non-arm's length transaction. This one backs up to a major thoroughfare. This one, the lot size is 3 times as big, and stuff like that. But anybody that wants to do that, if an agent or anybody else, if they find comparables and they look at them and they think that they are better, then yeah, by all means, send them to me. And I have in the past. I've considered other comparables, and I've looked at them, and yeah, I reconsidered my value.
So I was going to ask you, how often do you reconsider that value? Because I've tried that numerous times. I know you have too. A lot of times, nothing comes out of it.
Before you answer that, I want to interject. It's a process for the lender, right? So let's assume that Carlos is selling his home and Bob is buying it, and Bob gets an appraisal that's 20 grand lower. In the old days, you would just get the agents calling the lender, beating them up, and then the lender would submit for a reconsideration.
Right. That's why it's an easier mechanism.
Now, lenders that are being responsible are saying, no, we need permission from the buyer to request us reconsideration of value.
Right.
Because it's the buyer's decision to walk away or renegotiate first, not the lender and the realtors. So most of the times I've had buyers say, yeah, I'm willing to do that dance. But I've actually had one buyer said, no, I'm not. They either drop the price or we walk.
Yeah, it works out for them.
And they walked.
Yeah, it's a catch-22. Because what buyer is going to want to have their appraiser reconsider a higher value for a property they're buying?
Yep.
And I had that one. They were very angry because their comment was, "Wait, don't the realtors get paid on the price of the house?" They were very angry, and I'm like, "Guys, I am not getting in the middle of this. This is a math mechanism. You guys need to figure out: do you want the house or not? These are your choices. There's really 3. renegotiate, walk away, or submit a reconsideration. And it was tough. They walked. They were not happy.
Yep. Other times it works out. Depends on how bad they want.
Most of the time,
and
a lot
again,
of people
a lot of
are
that goes back to
compromised.
the agent. You said it earlier. You set the expectation for your buyer that this is what this is and this is what you're getting, and give them your opinion. and
Are
stuff.
there things that a seller can do to make it easier for you to do your appraisal when they renovated a home and want to sell it? So, like, for example, my home, we have brand new quartz counters, we have a brand new kitchen, we have, upgraded flooring, we access to the, all these different upgrades.
Uh-huh.
Does it matter if I give you that list of upgrades, or do you just
For
look
me
at the house
personally,
anyway?
yeah, I want to see that. I want to have that. And if for no other reason, that's documentation for me to put in my work file.
Okay.
So that if a lender or anybody ever comes back and says, well, how'd you come up with this adjustment for your home versus another one that doesn't have as maybe as good as improvements as you do? I can put that in my work file. I can pull it up, put it right in there. I'll see it when I'm there looking
Right.
at the home. I'll photograph
Your photographs.
it. I'll mention it in the report, but you can never have too much in your work file.
The reason I ask is, I live in a neighborhood where at the bottom of the hill, it's a $250,000 neighborhood, and at the very top of the hill, it's $1.5 million.
And that's the
And I'm right in the
question.
middle, so
And
how do
that's-
you get value out of that one?
Well, and that's the question: is you did all that, but do the rest of the homes in your neighborhood have that, or are you over improved? Because you
point.
can do over improvements, and if you are, then you're not going to get as much value for that.
I
People
think that
do a
phrase
lot
is
of
SOL.
people do a lot of improvements that they think they're going to get more value for. A lot of people think that they get dollar for dollar. If they spend, $75,000 on a pool, their house is worth $75,000 more, and it doesn't work that way, So.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that, because right now, more than any time in my career, I am encouraging some sellers to do a couple upgrades before they list their property.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing houses that have upgrades and improvements sell a lot faster, sell for more, obviously, and so it's just a smoother transaction. And I know just from a couple like flip experiences and real estate experience in general, been doing it for a long time, that there's certain upgrades that are worth doing and certain upgrades that are not worth doing. What, in your opinion, what's the best ROI for certain upgrades?
Again, know your neighborhood, because you don't want to over improve. But flooring, countertops, cabinets, appliances, and things like that. General just upkeep and maintenance. Most of the homes that I see, the pre-owned homes, have some type of deferred maintenance. My home
Sure.
has deferred maintenance.
Sure.
We just got a new roof from a hailstorm.
And you
but
look at all that too.
yeah, we look at all of that, because condition is a big thing about the differences in homes. If you're in a new construction neighborhood and you're appraising a brand new home, they all have the same upgrades. They all are in new conditions, so there's not a lot. So especially for pre-owned. Other things like maybe a patio cover, but don't go way overboard on it. Those are things that I consider. Depending on the market, maybe a fireplace. Some appraisers do and some people don't. Appraisers don't, and I don't all the time. It's not just a given that if you don't have a fireplace, I'm going to make an adjustment for it, because we are in San Antonio, but we do. It does get cold. So again, I look at the market. I look at the neighborhood. My wife might say, "Yeah, I like a fireplace." I might say, I could care less about a fireplace, unless it's outside,
Right.
Because I don't want to have to clean it and all that. So again, you kind of look at what your neighbors are doing. Most people that lived there for a while before they sell, they've been in their neighbors' homes. They've seen the trucks there, the workers out there, and they're cutting tile or whatnot. Flooring is another thing. If you have worn carpet's not very expensive. at the very least, have it steam cleaned. If it doesn't come out very well, and have it stretched. Little things like that can make a big difference.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
How much does cleanliness and decluttering come into effect when it comes to value?
There's a difference between cleanliness and clutter. If it's cluttered, if I go in to take a picture of a bedroom and I can't even see 80% of the floor, can't see any baseboards, then
There's a problem.
Yeah, or it's stacked up on the wall and I can't tell what's with the paint. Yeah, that's going to affect it. If their house they're in the process of moving and there's boxes and stuff, if it's a refinance or a sale between two private parties or whatnot, and they're living in the home and there's laundry and there's dishes in the sink and maybe a dirty pot, I don't see any of that. When I first pull up to a home, that tells me a lot right there.
Sure.
I learn a lot just by looking at Google, and then next thing I check, well, when did Google go by there? Okay, that was just a few months ago, or that was 2 years ago, and then when I pull up to it physically, and I go, okay, it's changed a lot. I can see that and I probably already know that they bought it about the time, or before that Google picture, and they've kept it up. It looks well maintained. And that has a lot to do with it. If you pull up on a house and you can right away tell that there's a lot of peeling, flaking paint, or that the eaves need to be painted, or there's sagging soffit and stuff like that.
That's all deferred maintenance.
Yeah. Then you kind of get an idea of what the overall conditions. You kind of get an idea. That doesn't mean I just pull up on a house and there are just drive-by appraisals where we only inspect the exterior. And so in a case like that,
when does that happen?
A big difference. If somebody's maybe doing a refinance for loan equity,
HELOC.
A HELOC, or sometimes if they put enough money down. And there's a big thing right now where the GSEs are changing the standards for when to actually order an appraisal. If somebody has enough money down, and so there really isn't that much risk for the lender.
But they also they
can waive the appraisal.
They're also looking at recent sales.
Sure.
The GSEs are looking, they've got the data. So they're saying, hey, just because you bought $1 million home or a $900,000 home and you put $500,000 down, we're going to make sure that that's really a safe bet.
Yep.
So they're doing all that. And when we run the loan through the automated underwriting system, it'll tell us whether or not. Now, we don't assume the buyer doesn't want the appraisal. We ask them because they might still want it.
That's exactly right, and that's a good point.
It's our responsibility to say, hey, you have the option.
Yep.
Because, in this situation, it's not being required.
Yeah.
So do you want one or not? And honestly, I've had a few of my buyers say, yeah, I do want to. I don't $800, and I get confirmation that value is really there. They're cool with it. Mm-hmm. For $800, it's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you're buying $500,000, you might want to spend the $800.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a situation recently where the seller was selling a home. It was $1.1 million, and the buyer put a huge down payment down. Well, we run the loan through the automated underwriting system, and it tells us this home does not qualify for an appraisal waiver. Well, the listing agent, the seller agent, was really upset, calls me very aggressively, asking me, why are we ordering an appraisal? I said, first of all, it's not your decision, it's the buyer's. I said, but secondly, there's a rule that if it's an over $1 million property, there is no waiver.
Right.
And instantly he got very calm and ended up the call.
Yeah. Run into that before.
People just don't know, and they think they do.
You mentioned something earlier about having as much information as possible for your file for that particular appraisal. Talk a little bit about what agents can do, listing agents can do to help you out when it comes to the value. And I always typically make an improvements list. I always typically make an improvements list and provide my own comps on how I came to that value. Try to help out the appraisal as much as possible. I feel like that's the best thing that I can do for my seller. But give me a couple ideas of what helps you.
Yeah. That's a good question. Like I said, the first thing is access to the property. We were talking earlier about not getting called back, and I can't tell you how many agents I've called, left messages for, and they never call me back, and I have a difficult time getting into the property. You got to remember, when I accept that order, there's a due date assigned, and now I'm on the clock. And so the sooner I can get in and get that property inspected, the sooner I can start working on the report. And the report is what is the most important part, and takes, well, not most important, but it's an important part and takes a lot of time depending. But I think it's always helpful for me. And I've heard some appraisers and some agents talk about other appraisers. Just for me, as I mentioned, I'll take any information that you want to provide me. If you want to do up a packet, I get that a lot from agents where they'll just make up a folder. They'll have a copy of the contract, which I typically don't need, but it's nice to have because I don't always get it, and I have to call and track it down. And that also might be different than what the contract may have changed. And so that might be the most updated contract.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because we don't always get the most updated until after the fact.
The amendments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then if any comparables that they think, I always say I love appraising a home in a neighborhood that the agent lives in that neighborhood. And surprisingly, it happens quite a bit. And it makes sense because a lot of realtors, they're going to market to their own neighborhood first.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though I educate myself on the market and I know a lot about different neighborhoods from doing this for 20 years, I'm not an expert on every neighborhood. I know my neighborhood because I've lived there for 20 years, So if an agent lives in the neighborhood and they have input and stuff they want to share, I think that's very helpful. It might be about the HOA, it might be about the amenities, it might be about the neighborhood. I'll hear some agents say, "Oh yeah, I've been in that house, I showed it." Might be, a house that recently sold that I'm thinking is a comparable, and they've actually been in it. You got to take that with a grain of salt. But,
sure.
So comparables are good. Any features, updates, anything like that are always good and helpful. And then anything about the transaction. I can look and say, oh, the home was only on the market 32 days, whatnot. But I may not be able to discern from the MLS or information that if they had people competing. And I hear that from time to time, and I get that asked when I'm talking to agents and stuff. Does it really matter? Does the appraiser really want to know that, that we got in a kind of a bidding war? We had multiple offers on this property.
Sure, right.
And again, I can't speak for all appraisers, but for me, yeah, it does make a difference because, again, when you're looking at the appraisal, we call it the opinion of value. It's my opinion of value as of the day that I inspected the property. And a lot of times, a value may have a range, and we get it down as close as we can. And we're looking, is it kind of like this, or I could probably support that, or is that going to fall in the middle, on the lower end, maybe on the higher end because of that information that I got. I always like to say that give me as much information as you can, and I'll determine what's important and what's not. And again, not all of appraisers are like that. Having said that, if you're planning on meeting the appraiser at the property, that's okay for me. But if it's a vacant home and you're going to plan on meeting me there when I schedule the appraisal, I try to be early for everything, or at least on time. So if I schedule it for 10, I'm going to be there at 10. But I may get something, traffic, something I get caught up in. It's a vacant home. I'm maybe not going to make it there until 10:30 or 11. I don't want that agent just sitting there waiting on me. So if you're going to meet me, let me know. And that way, too, I can start the communication with the agent. We don't like to be followed around. If you want to meet me there, and it's for me, the ideal situation is the agent shows up there and
you don't want the buyer's dad right behind you.
Yeah, they either leave something there. or they meet me there, they open it up and they don't have to or whatever. They give me what they have, they explain it, which I think they're taking their time. That's nice. I think they're, that means a lot for me and says a lot about their integrity and what they're doing for their client and how they're earning their commission and their money, just like I'm trying to earn mine. And then either if they want to stay in the house and do work while I do my job, that's fine. Just not follow me around, or what you mentioned. We call those Uncle Bobs.
I get you.
That was a phrase that was introduced to me my first month of learning to do appraisals. And, you'll get Uncle Bob that wants to follow you around and tell you everything. And it quite frankly, it's distracting. That's usually when you're going to end up having to go back and remeasure the house because you either didn't write down a measurement, or maybe you, instead of going to the left, you went to the right, or something like that. We have the ability to schedule the appraisal through the MLS, and I like to do that. It's convenient. It gets me in. It gets me it gets me a quick response for the lender because, again, as soon as I accept that order, I'm on the clock. They want me to have that scheduled within 24 hours, within however many period of time after I inspect it. They want the report back, and definitely don't miss the due date. But I like to have that communication because if there's something they do want to talk about or they do want to show me, that is helpful for me. You just don't want to go to the other end where, like you were talking about earlier, where you're browbeating us and you're saying, oh, the value's here, and oh, I've been doing this, for 5 years now, or whatever, and no, and trying to influence the appraiser.
Yeah.
I also think it's a good opportunity because, again, and I've been in the business and you have too long enough, that there's always kind of been this thing between appraisers and agents. We can't talk, we can't get along.
This is not an us
we can't
and them.
we can't be in the on the same playground together. We just yeah. And I hear a lot of agents say, well, you can't talk to the appraiser. You can talk. I can talk to the agent, especially the listing agent.
I can't.
Buyer's agents, I'm very, very, very guarded because obviously, they want what they want. Listing agents, I have to have some contact with them most of the time. Sometimes I can do an appraisal, and I never talk to anybody. It's all done through the MLS. I go there, I do the job, I do the report, I send it in. I never even see anybody.
As long as it's appraising, you're not going to talk to anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the hardest types of properties to appraise? I'm sure you have a couple stories.
The most difficult ones are the ones that are most unique. I mentioned there's a lot of different
Custom.
types of appraisals, and market estimates is one of them. So again, I mentioned earlier, you have that agent, whether they're a new agent or an experienced agent, doesn't matter. They just come across that one property that they're just like, I don't know, And for an appraiser, it's intimidating. When you look at it, it's like, oh no, I don't even want to tackle that. And you have to know that. You have to know your limits. If it's something that I really don't know anything about, like I can do acreage, I can do lots and stuff, I can do small acreage, but I'm not going to attempt to do anything probably over 5, maybe 10 acres.
Farm and ranch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are difficult, and really that requires
Especially if
an
there's
appraiser.
a lot of buildings out there.
And there are some appraisers, especially in those areas. You mentioned a rural area.
Right.
And there are appraisers that work in that area, and they have access to information either from their work files, from other appraisers, not just from their MLS and their taxes, and from talking to other agents.
Well, they know their market. They're
Yeah,
experts. That's
yeah.
what they're doing all the time.
Yeah, but any property where it just doesn't fit in the box, the best appraisals for me is, in a cookie cutter neighborhood where there's
Sure.
plenty of comps that are all similar.
Those are easy.
Yeah, and and that's another thing. When I quote a price for some of these pre-listing and pre-marketing and stuff like that, a lot of times they'll balk at the price, and I just tell them, I said, look, I can do 3 of these other type appraisals, and the time's going to take me to do that one.
Because it's difficult.
Because it's that difficult. Having said that, I also like doing them they're a challenge. You get to see things that you don't normally see, and you have to think out of the box. I've actually taken continuing education classes on unique properties, domes, dome homes, log cabins,
Barndominiums.
Barndominiums. I've done a couple barndominiums, and they're unique. And again, I look at it as a puzzle, and I have to find the pieces myself. I'm again going back to that. Why Jesus a two-story? Because it was the only one that would represent
Close
this
enough.
particular
Yeah.
feature. Read the report. It doesn't say I put most of my weight on that two-story, but it does show the value of how I came up with that value for that pool or whatever that feature is. And that's kind of what it is with the unique homes. They have so many different features that are there that you gotta use multiple comps. You got to go to different areas. You have to make a lot of different adjustments. You have to adjust for this because you want everything to be on the same plane.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I found the most difficult ones for me to evaluate are the ones that are different,
Unique.
custom or different, unique,
Unique,
in
custom.
a neighborhood like you said where every house is different. That's when I'll call in an expert.
Yeah.
You're doing appraisals more often than me, looking at all
Right.
those values. So I've only asked an appraiser to come out a handful of times, but I mean, it definitely helps. You've seen a lot more than I have.
Yeah.
But like you said, for the most part, those cookie cutter neighborhoods, those are so simple. That's really, really easy. I would say we're almost about done here.
I think so.
Yeah, we're almost about done. I have a couple more questions for you, just leading off. What are some pieces of advice you can give a seller and a buyer from both ends, looking at both ends when it comes to appraisals?
The biggest thing I think I see with appraisals is people think that we work for the lender. And in an indirect way, it is the lender that is paying our fees, and they are our client. But we're independent. Our profession is based on we're independent. We don't. It's not going to matter to me if the sale gets done or it doesn't get done. It doesn't matter to me what the value comes in at, again, depending on the type of the property and stuff. So there's no need to fear an appraiser.
Well, I want to interject on one point there. The lender isn't paying the fee. The buyer is.
Again,
because,
in a roundabout
yeah,
way.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
the
what I'm
buyer
saying
is because we send
Right.
the invoice to the buyer
Right.
and make them pay for it up front.
Right.
Because we want to stay out of that transaction.
Yeah. Yeah, but a lot of people think that the lender hire us or that
Right.
we are actually
Or that we get to pick you.
employed.
That's a good point.
My point is a lot of people think we are actually employed by
Oh, really?
the lender.
Sure.
I get that
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah. Oh,
Interesting.
All day
you
long.
work for the lender. Yes and no, And I mean, I can see how that can be confusing.
Interesting, yeah. Okay.
I always explain that up front when I'm talking to the buyers for the first time. They've never been through it.
Yeah.
I tell them it's a total third party.
Yeah. And again, look at your home and just like if anybody else is going to come and visit it, typically if it's on the market, you've had it show ready.
Sure.
And
But they should do the same thing for you
Yeah.
if they're doing a pre-listing and appraisal.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to schedule the appointment. I'm coming. And if you work nights or you have a situation, just, let your agent know so they can let me know. A lot of times I go to a property and they say, oh, the owner's going to let you in, and I'm knocking on the door and I'm waking them up. And I'm trying to go through the house and inspect it, and there's somebody sleeping in one of the bedrooms.
That makes it difficult.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult. And I know a lot of agents tell their sellers, try to leave when the appraiser's there, because they do
Sure.
for the home inspection, which, home inspections are brutal. I wouldn't want to be there for it until the end either. And again, I don't know how other appraisers do it. Me personally, I don't mind if the owners are there, because I'm going to have questions. I want to ask them. You
Sure.
know, if I see you got updated countertops, how long ago was that?
Sure.
You know, oh, let me think back. 1 to 5 years, 1 to 3 years, over 5 years, something like that. Or what have you done recently?
Sure.
Another thing that would be good for people to know is like, you know, oh, we just put a new roof on. Okay, does that add value? Yes and no. If you're trying to sell it and the roof's not good, it's only going to be worth this much. And just because you put a new roof on it, it might come up to the market. So for me, from below the market to here, yes, I gave you value for it. But you think because you got a new roof and maybe these other ones don't, that yours is worth that much more. And it doesn't always work that way.
Gotcha. That's a
That's
good.
an interesting perspective.
That's a good point.
It's got to have, yeah,
That's a good
because
point.
for me anyway, as an appraiser, I don't think it, you know, there's the baseline. I'm always looking at positives and negatives.
Sure.
And that goes back to doing stuff that they're going to get their best return for their investment on. And
That deferred
you gotta
maintenance or
get
that
it.
upkeep.
Yeah, you got to get
That
it up
one
to
thing or
market.
a couple things you've been putting off for a couple
Yeah.
years, it might be time to do it.
Yeah, and you as an agent, you're looking at, oh, the market should bring this much. Look at the house.
I asked
the
all
house
those questions.
is below the market.
Yeah.
You know, and again, that touch-up paint, that flooring,
Yeah.
that doing a little bit of work on the outside, trimming the trees away from the house,
Sure.
cutting the grass,
Yep.
doing something with that fence back there.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and
I got one more bonus question I just
Okay.
thought about right now since you're
All right.
talking about the roofs. A lot of people commonly think that solar panels are a really good upgrade and give them what they're paying for them as added value to the house, which we all know that's not the truth. How do you evaluate or put any type of value towards solar panels?
yeah, and that's another question I get asked frequently, and I've gotten even some agents that'll call me and say, well, we know you don't give value for solar panels, right? No, that's not true. If I can assign a value to solar panels, I will. Any improvement that's on the property, and that's why I'm here measuring, walking around, taking photographs. You know, I'm not just looking for problems that you have. I'm looking for positive things that you have.
It's
To
not
add-
dollar for dollar, right?
Well, here's the thing about solar panels. Is that company even still in business?
oh, good
A
point.
lot of solar panel companies, they'll come in, they'll sell you a bunch of solar panels, and then they go out of business. So there's no warranty, there's no information, nothing's verifiable. How long have you had them? Is it from a reputable company? Are they still in business? How many panels do you have? How many kilowatts? Are you hooked up to the grid? What's your savings per month, semi, annually, any of that? You know, all that is good information. But for me to get that information after the fact is extremely difficult.
Sure.
When we sold our house in Fair Oaks, not only was it a really large one-story, 3,500 square feet, but we had a custom pool and we had solar.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. So I felt really sad for that appraiser because he was working for probably 2 weeks to try and find us comps. He really went out of his way because it was a VA buyer, which meant it has to be perfect.
Yep.
And he was going into Bulverde, he was going into Helotes to try and find us like type houses with solar, with a pool. That was all custom. And he added enough value that at least it paid off what we owed on the solar loan.
Yeah.
And you know what? I consider that a win.
That is a win.
Right.
Yeah,
You know?
that doesn't often happen.
Couple of things more on that. You know, I did an appraisal one time and I had solar panels, and they give me this information and as much information as they can. I thought the agent did a good job with working with the seller and stuff. And when I went to go look at it, I walked back there and I'm looking at the panel and it's not even hooked up to CPS yet. So I'm like,
What?
you know, no. You know,
That's wild.
Why?
That's wild.
And then there was one neighborhood that I went into, and I think it was in a 78240, and it's just a little small 2 or 3 street neighborhood. And I pulled up And I get out, and I'm looking at the house, I'm getting ready to take my photographs on the front exterior, and I look up and I go, okay, solar panels. So I look over to the next house. No. Yes. Yes. No. Yes. Yes. There's another one. There's another. And I'm like, most of them have solar panels.
Someone killed it on that neighborhood.
You know?
But it's also easier to factor in value.
Also,
Right.
some.
Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah. If you
Because
can
now you
compare
have
it to
like
that.
comparables.
Yeah. Again, the only way we can assign value is if we can extrapolate adjustment for it, and to do that, we have to have
Sure.
other sales that support it, or other ways. There's 3 types of value, we don't just rely on one type of value. So, yeah, those are my solar panel stories.
Well, Jeff, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank
Appreciate
you
for
for
having me.
I
Yeah.
feel
Really
like
do. Yeah.
I always learn stuff on these podcasts, asking these questions. No matter how long we've been in the industry, we always learn something, right? And I think it's a lot of good information for the buyers and sellers out there.
Good.
So, Carlos, you have anything else?
No, I really appreciate your time. That's a lot of your information helps bring value to me too.
Definitely.
Good.
Definitely.
Glad to hear it.
Cool.
That's what I'm here for.
Well, until next time, folks, we'll see you.
Thanks, guys.